Welcome back. The time is 3 minutes past nine. Still tuned in to Salam Media on the Wednesday edition, or not Wednesday, Thursday edition of News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. And coming up next, we'll be speaking corruption. A new study has revealed the lack of confidence South Africans have in the ability of law enforcement agencies to tackle corruption. According to Corruption Watch's latest survey, a third of the people surveyed have no confidence at all in the laws designed to combat corruption. And to chat to us briefly about that survey, we'll be speaking to Corruption Watch's campaign coordinator, Mzwandile Banjathwa. Mzwandile, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Salam Media.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
First and foremost, can you provide us with an overview of the findings from Corruption Watch's latest survey? And what are some of the numbers? What's the survey saying about confidence in the government and dealing with corruption?
Sure. So this research study aims to firstly highlight the perceptions, the characteristics, and also the prevalence of corrupt practices, both in the public and also in the private sector. And it then offers us these valuable insights into the prevalence of this corruption phenomenon in our country. So the study primarily the study's primary focus has been to firstly gauge the overall perceptions of South Africans, as well as to touch on citizens' direct experiences with corruption on various levels of government. So we have then taken about 1,500 respondents. All of these respondents were permanent residents of South Africa with a key geographic variety from the locations where they come from, be it rural and urban areas and semi-urban areas, and also looking at gender, race, educational attainment, and also their income levels. And what we then found in terms of the perception was that when we looked at law enforcement, what we found is that 65% of these respondents expressed clear skepticism regarding the adequacy of South Africa's law enforcement in effectively combating corruption, while the 35% held a different opinion. Regarding confidence in the adequacy of anti-corruption legislation and policies that have been put in place, nearly half of these respondents, about 49%, then clearly exhibited low levels of confidence, with 32% expressing no confidence at all that the current pieces of legislations and policies that we have has the ability to actually fight corruption. Only 20% express confidence in the country's ability to fight corruption through the pieces of legislations that we have. We then looked at their knowledge of these various pieces of laws and legislations that exist, from the PFMA and so forth. What we found is that there is a notable majority of respondents, about 54% of them, which indicated a limited understanding of anti-corruption legislations within the South African context. And we found that 27% of them have the proficient understanding of such laws. The highest proportion, unfortunately, that we found is that more women than men reported to having no knowledge of these pieces of legislation, about 21%, and those who had limited knowledge were 57%. So there are more men, about 32%, when compared to women, with 23% who had good understanding of these pieces of legislation. And what we found is that those who had knowledge of these pieces of legislation, when you look at them in the rural areas and the suburban areas, the respondents reported a very proficient understanding of anti-corruption laws. So on average, most respondents indicated that they had limited understanding of these pieces of legislation. But in general, most respondents, irrespective of their gender or their location, held an opinion that the establishments themselves primarily prioritize affluent individuals, and then neglect the interest of ordinary South Africans. In terms of addressing corruption, we found that the respondent had less trust in elected and appointed officials. On average, they gave a higher rating and strongly untrusting or strongly untrustful of organizations such as Chapter 9 institutions, then Chapter 10 institution, like even also the NPA has lower trust level, the
mm,
SAPS has lower trust levels, the judiciary, parliament, and the presidency as well. But what we find is that respondents are expressing greater trust in the media, on religious and spiritual institutions, as well as independent legal and investigative firms, to effectively address corruption.
And I want to touch a bit on the survey and it highlighting a significant number of respondents who reported personal experiences with corruption.
Mm.
What are some of the common challenges faced by citizens when trying to report corruption or seek justice?
Yeah, so we looked at it in both ways: the perception side of it, and also the experience side of it. What we then found is that one, there is a sizable number of people who have interacted with law enforcement. So those who have interacted with law enforcement, we find that some have interacted with police officers, and some have interacted with licensing officers, and also some have interacted with judges, magistrates, and so forth. And what we then found is that the areas that are greatly affected by corruption is that 81% of them believe that government is not doing enough to address corruption in the provision of basic services. On average, more than 60% of respondents agree that corruption mostly affects the provision of housing and also of land. Safety and security was also highlighted as the greatest effects, having greatest effects of corruption. But clearly, they state that corruption has direct impact on human rights, and also it threatens democracy as well. And what we find is that there are different people, those who interacted with different officials, would clearly state that they have offered some form of gratifications, be it in the form of gifts and be it in the form of favors. And those gifts would vary from valuables, be it jewelry and so forth, and also food, and also money. And it's quite interesting that we also finding that some of them have even given money and also favors to people like magistrates and people like
Mm,
judges and also people like prosecutors as well. So it doesn't boast well for the judiciary. So there is a lack of trust in these institutions, be it the judiciary, be it parliament, as we've seen in the past. The
mm,
failure of parliament to hold the president account in the parliament had greater impact. The failure of parliament to pass laws timelessly, and also making sure that they give these pieces of legislation enough thought. As we've seen, most of the bills that have been passed now, they're constantly being challenged legally, so they don't necessarily have the constitution in mind. And
mm,
also, like the NPA and also the Office of the Public Protector, which has also been plagued with scandals left, right, and center. The NPA's inability to effectively deal with corruption cases, particularly those affecting higher ranking political officials, is also something that has been problematic. The police have not been posting quite well. We
mm,
know that there is now the SAPS has been fined since 2009, since 2018 till to date. They've paid over 2 billion of fines, or rather being sued 2 point something billion, because they've not been able to because of wrongful arrests that they've been making.
mm. And just lastly, before I let you go, we're heading to the elections on the 29th of May, less than 3 weeks to go. What impact do you foresee these findings influencing voter behavior and priorities in the upcoming elections?
I think there's outcomes do not boast well for established political parties, particularly those that have been in parliament and have been serving in parliament, given that these funding points directly to institutions that they serve in, including parliament. So it comes at a very important and opportune time when members of the public would be going to casting their vote. So these are some of the things that they have to look at and look at the manifesto of these political parties, particularly when it comes to dealing with corruption. Are they able to decisively deal with corruption? What is it that they are opposing? What they're proposing, is it sufficient enough to deal with corruption? What is their posture on corruption? Because corruption has greater impact on our day-to-day life.
All right. I think we're going to leave it there. Mzwandile, thank you so much for giving us your time and unpacking that very, very important report for us. We're going to let you go for now. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
There you have it there, Mzwandile Banjathwa. Just painting a very, very bleak picture when it comes to corruption in South Africa. And we know this has been an issue for quite some time. It has been plaguing our nation for, I don't know, since forever, since the dawn of South Africa. I think since South Africa became South Africa, corruption has been at the heart of the conversation. And it has limiting our growth. I think a lot, can be can be achieved if corruption was curbed, but right now it's just relentless. Everyone is just doing as they please, and I hope going into the elections there's going to be change, and we're going to consider the plague of corruption when casting our ballots. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, African Muslims Agency will be joining us.